Greetings. My name is Mark Gura. This presentation is a recreation of the talk I gave virtually at the 2023 ISTE Live conference. I'm one of the two co-authors of the book published by ISTE titled Creative SEL, Using Hands-on Projects to Boost Social Emotional Learning. For myself and my co-author Michele Haiken, this book project was a deep dive into student projects to foster social emotional learning and student creativity. The book has 32 chapters offering 32 project-based activities, and of course these align to a large number of standards. I'm going to be sharing several of the projects with you shortly. From one of them, titled Be Your Own Life Coach, I took these two standards, and I see them very much as emblematic of the work we've done throughout the book. In all of the projects, students are asked to reflect on aspects of their lives, aspects of themselves, their relationships, and their community. This is Standard 1.3, Knowledge Constructor. Students build knowledge by actively exploring real-world issues and problems, developing ideas and theories, and pursuing answers and solutions. Standard 1.6 is also highly aligned with the projects. Creative Communicator. Students create original works or responsibly repurpose or remix digital resources into new creations. That, in a nutshell, is the main focus of each of the projects. What are we going to address in this talk? Well, a little theory and context for doing project-based social emotional learning. I've prepared project samples to share, and there are resource links available that I'll provide at the end. And I think that if you choose to pursue this kind of work with your students, you'll find them very useful. So, just a little bit of background about myself, my co-author, and the experience of putting the book together. I've been involved in the field of education for a very long time. My first 17 years as a middle school visual arts teacher, gradually including teaching literacy and social studies as well, eventually going to work for the central office of the New York City school system, where I was in charge of a number of curriculum and instruction projects citywide, and eventually made director of instructional technology for the New York City school system. Michele, my co-author, is a long-term in-service middle school ELA teacher, and she also teaches at university to share her extensive experience with newer teachers. Both of us have been focused on doing hands-on creative projects with students for a good part of our careers. This is my 7th book for ISTE. Michele has done several as well. We approached the ISTE book publishing division with a proposal for a book on creative, hands-on projects in the classroom, easy-to-do projects that would enrich the experience of kids across the curriculum. And we had some very rich discussions. They were quite interested. Long story short, eventually we came to the idea of using the new and rapidly growing interest in fostering social emotional learning as a focus. The two of us wrote a good number of the projects, but also reached out to our various professional networks and got submissions from 14 other contributors. And so the body of work we present between the covers of this book is a very diverse view of instruction in this area from a very diverse group of contributors who come from numerous cultural groups in our society. We felt the need to ground our work in some solid research-based social emotional learning framework, and so we turned to CASEL, CASEL stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And in the resource handout offered towards the end of this presentation, you'll find a link to their site. CASEL, in my mind, is kind of the gold standard for philosophy and approaches for teaching social emotional learning. The framework shown on the left is from their website. Importantly, SEL is a very broad area. In my daily inbox, for instance, I'm constantly getting offers from resource providers who claim that one thing or another is social emotional learning. Sometimes I see the connection, sometimes I don't. In putting the body of work for our book together, we saw the wisdom of the way CASEL had organized SEL into these 5 areas: self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and self-management. If you take a look at the book and its table of contents, which is actually a useful resource for anyone interested in doing this work, and that's another item that's in the handouts made available at the end, you'll see that we organized the book around these 5 areas. And the 32 projects that we offer are more or less equally divided among these. And this is all great, except these are abstract concepts. And what we feel strongly is you don't want to engage K through 12 students simply in discussions or providing content about these 5 areas, presenting them as abstract concepts, which gets to the theme and point of our book, taking these and fleshing them out, translating them into appealing projects for students to do. Just a little more theory, and then we're going to look at the first sample project, being your own life coach, accepting who you are. That's a project that typically involves a good degree of student creativity, which brings us to the question, why creativity? Why student creativity as a way to foster learning and the acquisition of social emotional understandings? Well, creativity is inherently aligned with the affective side of our lives, our emotional side. You know, we have these temples to creativity, our art museums and theaters. A visit to any of these will show that the creative works they feature are primarily about the affective side of life. And so involving students in creative projects is very likely an effective way to have them access that side of themselves. We also feel it's true that the type of learning projects the book offers are fertile ground for social learning. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of communal artworks where students create work as a community and where that makes a great difference in the learning. Also, we're very keen on the completion of the student product. The book's projects all revolve around the creation of a product. The product, we feel, is not the end of the learning experience, but the students' sharing of what they've produced deepens and expands the learning in a variety of ways. Students can share their products with one another, within their group or class, with the greater school community, and beyond that. That's a vital part of the value that can be had from these projects. And of course, in addition to the emotional and social learning that's available, there's a cognitive side to it too. Students will practice their communication skills, writing, oral communication, researching, and more through the projects. So what kind of products do we have kids creating in the book? Well, visual art, writing, combinations of the two, spoken and performed works, videos, podcasts, that sort of thing. We also see the products as somewhat interchangeable. I mentioned there are 32 projects, each of which models the creation of a product, but the products can be exchanged between many of the projects. They're interchangeable, and this flexibility strongly provides for student voice and choice. Okay, so what's the instructional approach we're recommending? Well, it's very much project-based learning. And a further dimension of this that I feel is really rich and vital is that what we're modeling for students is that they self-personalize the content of the projects. Each of these projects presents a challenge. We ask students to focus on themselves, their relationships with others, and with their community. Each student interprets what the challenge is for themselves. In other words, they self-personalize. Thus, the great opportunity for student voice and choice here. And again, each project is driven by the student creation of a product, or it might be a performance, although we stress the product side of it. And that often involves authentic information gathering. One of the projects we offer is titled the School Bullying Report, in which a group of students go out and interview people and conduct surveys. They gather information and prepare a report to the school community about the state of bullying in that school. And there's also a lot of learning to be had through the need to communicate what's been discovered and analyzed. And again, the sharing of these products creates a very vital experience of learning for a purpose and of the student learning producing an impact on the school. When students know what they're producing is going to be seen by a broad audience, they take the activity very seriously and very personally. Okay, last piece of theory, and I think this is a perfect thing to bring up at an ISTE conference. Question: what would the role of technology be in these projects? Again, students are challenged to create a product. And by the way, we made a strong point in putting this book together that these products that the students produce can be done either with conventional materials, drawing paper, pen, pencil, crayon, markers, that sort of thing, or they can be done with technology. Or, and I think this is most realistic, you'll see some examples of these done as a hybrid. So, the role of technology in doing these projects is sometimes to support the gathering of material. For instance, one of them that I'll show you, which is titled Our Two Environments, the Built and the Natural, and How They Make Us Feel, that project has students comparing the built environment and the natural environment that they experience in their lives. They go out and take photographs as reference and raw material, and they either draw from these photos or make a collage of them. When the teacher contributor of this project does this activity with her class, she has her students use the school iPads as cameras. And beyond the gathering of material, technology is also very useful in producing the finished products themselves. It's very reassuring to students to have the ability to produce something that looks somewhat professional to them. And as we all know, the technology makes that possible. Technology is behind a very major transformation in the lives of learners. It has supported them in evolving from content consumers to content creators. And the polished, professional, readable aspects of processed text and images and sound and more that common classroom technology makes possible was crucial in this profound development. Students have been empowered to see themselves as creators of content items on par with those that they're surrounded by on television and the web and in the print items they come across as well. And then finally, in the sharing of the products they produce, and I'll give some illustrations of that. Once students have gone through the chain of processes to produce a finished product and communicate their learning and thinking and more, how do they share that? Well, there are resources like blogs and online galleries and uploaded video and other ways as well that make the sharing work so well in our tech-saturated world. That's technology at the service of learning and growing and having a voice in one's world. So now we come to our first project titled Being Your Own Life Coach, Accepting Who You Are. Avatars to help us reflect on who we are and who we want to become. All of us have experienced during adolescence the beginning of that voice at the back of our head of dissatisfaction with who we are compared to what we believe are the societal norms. This can be a difficult part of growing up and being a person. And so this very first project in the book, in the section titled Self-Awareness, has kids reflecting on that and then creating avatars and dialogue to identify and work through a personal issue and communicate their learning and growing process to an audience. The book presents the projects in a way in which you can find all of the elements of a lesson plan. There's the standards, materials needed, ways to differentiate and vary the project, and information on how to implement it. There are suggestions for culturally responsive aspects of the projects, as well as links for hacks on how to create the products. Importantly, we give a brief description of the activity, including the procedure and the description of the product, and we're going to look at an example of that in just a moment. So what makes the projects work well? In my mind, the crux of it has to do with these two things. One, we challenge students to reflect on some aspect of their lives and to discuss it. And again, all of the projects relate to those 5 areas that Castle points to, the 5 broad areas of SEL. And there's the challenge of producing the product, but it's not the discussion, it's not the reflection on the theme, and it's not just creating the product, it's the aggregation of all of this. It's the way these aspects of student attention work together. Here are a couple of captures I took directly from the book. I talked before about the write-ups providing a short description of each project. This project is called Life Coach, and the description says, students reflect on and record their thoughts, feelings, and discoveries about a part of themselves that may concern them in comparison and conjunction with social norms. I think that's every kid. Every kid feels, that they don't like the sound of their voice, that their behavior isn't what it should be, that they don't look the way they wish they did. In this project, we have students reflect on that. Reflection prompts are provided to allow students to self-reflect and discuss how one balances societal expectations with reality. Students will write a dialogue that they feel reflects good inner advice directed at supporting them and accepting themselves. Okay, so in each of the book chapters, we provide for teachers Such a brief activity description. But thinking back to my own teaching, and again, I was a visual art teacher in middle school for 17 years, this is the way I always started a unit with my students. I would give them a very brief end-to-end description of the project we would be working on. I'd say to them something like, we're going to be thinking about parts of ourselves that we're unhappy with. We're going to use some graphic organizers to help us record our thoughts and feelings about that. You might want to share those with a partner in the class. And then we're going to do a project. We're going to create an avatar that encapsulates that troubled part of ourselves. And then maybe you're going to think about a part of yourself that can give the troubled part some good advice. Or maybe it's a good friend who can give you good advice. We're going to create an avatar for that person too, and then we're going to write some dialogue. And we're going to produce a nice little poster out of all of this that we can share with others, maybe even share with the rest of the school. So again, I think that these short activity descriptions, while initially intended for the teacher, are a great thing to share with the students to get them started. And then also in the chapter, there's a fully fleshed out procedure, like a lesson plan. In this particular project, this goes on for quite a bit. I'm just giving you a little snippet here. The teacher can begin by asking students for examples of societal norms and expectations for teens today, or gender norms for girls and boys. Let's look at this student project. Here you see the embodiment of what I was just describing to you. Angela, and students certainly don't need to use their own name. They can give themselves an alter ego for a project like this. This project is potentially important emotional work. It's a simple prompt though. Think about some part of yourself you're not happy with, a part the world sees and may judge you negatively for. Identify that and describe it. Write a bit about it. Create an avatar that shows how you feel when you're in touch with that part. In this poster, that's Angela. Leona is the other side, the other part of this student, or perhaps it's a friend or an imagined life coach. And so at the end of this process, we come up with this focused, highly communicative, and attractive product that can be shared. A couple of quick observations from what we discovered in doing the book. We realize that SEL can be difficult to fit into the existing school instructional program. What we recommend is a project-based learning approach that might fit in a variety of places throughout the instructional program, different subjects. We intentionally avoided any political hot-button minefields. You may see them in the news associated or misassociated with SEL. Subject areas, all of these projects can have cross-curricular connections. The one we just looked at is obviously ELA. It's writing, illustrating that writing, graphic communication. It could be performed as a playlet, perhaps a recorded performance, or more. The projects, as we model them, fit into realistic time frames, a couple of class periods in a regular classroom. Again, you can do them with technology that's easily available, with a Chromebook, for instance, or you can use conventional materials, paper, pen, crayon, marker, or my preference would be to do a hybrid project. Student creativity and the role of these projects, I feel, is important here. Again, I was a middle school art teacher for 17 or 18 years. And reflecting on the past, people often think, boy, it would be great if we would reinstate the arts in the schools. I can tell you as a veteran, though, that even when I was a full-time art teacher, it was actually a very thin program. Frequently, my semester's assignment would have me teaching 350 students that I saw once a week for 90 minutes. And since those days, we've lost a lot of ground in the arts. So I think that doing the sorts of projects that the book models is a way to reestablish the arts, at least in part, and integrate them across the curriculum. Student creativity, shouldn't it really be a more prominent feature of what today's kids learn? Are we really giving a generation that will increasingly need to exercise its innovation and creativity muscles all that it needs? Further, I still find many schools are looking for meaningful ways to integrate technology. So I feel what we're offering here through project-based SEL is one way to ensure that there's meaningful tech integration. So the creative SEL approach represents a great opportunity for student creativity, meaningful tech integration, as well as social emotional learning. I think for a great many educators and schools, what's been missing has simply been a practical and appealing way to make all of this happen. I mentioned before that in the resources and handouts at the end of this presentation is the full table of contents to the book. That's 32 projects. Here, though, I can only offer this excised short sample. Importantly, though, the table of contents on its own can aid in planning a program of SEL. Offering students fully fleshed out projects is crucial because, in my mind, you can't effectively teach social emotional learning through engaging kids in discussions of and reading about abstract concepts, self-awareness, for instance. However, by doing projects, full projects, the students come to a deep understanding of the concepts. There's one here called Divided Heart, Collaging and Communicating Cultural Mindfulness. This fully engages kids in an enjoyable effort to communicate about having an emotional connection to two different worlds. Perhaps exploring the difference between one's native country and that of a new life here in the US, or perhaps between the cultural reality of a grandparent and the world that the student experiences currently. Another one that I think has a lot of relevance these days, it's one of a group of projects in the book that are quite topical. It's under the section Responsible Decision Making, and the project's title is, Do You Have a Phone or Does Your Phone Have You? And in this one, again, students do self-reflection, self-surveying. They may ask, when do I gravitate to my phone? Why do I look at my phone? What am I actually doing? What's the value of it? They gather all of this, reflect on it, and then they translate all of that into something very attractive, a poster or infographic, for instance. And so this becomes an art project derived from self-discovery and communication about it. So now I want to shift gears and share a wonderful serendipity that came out of this book project for me, something very near and dear to my heart. And the way I'm presenting this to you is through the question, so what's the lasting impact of project-based SEL? And for me, this is, I'll even use the word magical thing that came out of the project. As I mentioned to you previously, my colleague and I were looking for contributors. And so through our various professional networks, we managed to attract 14 other contributors of activities. What you're looking at are some photos of myself 30 plus years ago in my non-technologized art classroom. The school was the East Harlem Performing Arts School. It actually was a school for average kids, and we used the arts as a way to help them adjust and succeed with their academics. That was the school's mission and vision. Why am I showing you this? Well, because out of the 14 contributors, 2 of them are former middle school students of mine. And over on the left of the screen is my student Lala, who's now, sorry Lala, approaching middle age. She's one of the 2 former student contributors to the book who I'm going to share with you about. So what was going on in my classroom back then? Well, I was very focused on art projects that addressed SEL, although we weren't even using the term social emotional learning then, or maybe it was a new term back then. But that's very much the crux of what I was doing. And I did this project in my classroom titled The Gorgeous Mosaic. We had a Mayor Dinkins at the time, who was all about getting the people of New York City, that's where I taught in Harlem. He was promoting harmony amongst the various groups who made up the population, and so he called the city a gorgeous mosaic of types of people, of diverse cultures. I presented to my students this project in which kids focused on a certain member of a certain cultural group and then researched that and then illustrated that person. And one of the points of this was the power of working together as a community, because this was a communal art project. And so I would have each of my students produce 3 to 4 of these mini portraits, and then at the end we put them all together and we produced this wonderful panel of miniature portraits. And then a colleague and I started to share this first throughout New York City, and then around the United States, and then throughout the world. And teachers would ship us panels produced in their classroom, panels of little portraits done on this theme. And it's a long story, but the short of it is that maybe we received 100,000 of these mini portraits, and we put them all together in a gallery in the Manhattan Children's Museum. And that's a photo of a much younger Mark standing in front of that, proudly. Another of my students from all those years ago responded to the call for contributors. He's a gentleman by the name of Dula, and I remember that name from when he was in my class so many years before. He now is a community worker, a community educator, and runs an educational effort that he calls Dula's Neighborhood, in which he gathers kids together, sometimes in school, sometimes in a community center or similar setting, and has them focus on an aspect of their lives or an aspect of the life of the community. They sit in a group, and each contributes 1 or more phrases or words as a message or affirmation to the community. And after rendering this with art materials, and when they're all put together, they form a gorgeous thing, a work of art that gets displayed in the neighborhood, in the community. And so here you have that gentleman. That's Dula on the right. He's now retired from the Marines. And here you see him working with a group of kids doing some of the community focusing work. And these are some of the word portraits that his groups create. They will, as a group, pick a theme like mindfulness or gratitude and sit and talk about what that means to them, maybe argue about it a little bit, till they come to an agreement, and then they start illustrating their brainstormed body of words and phrases. The end products are these very beautiful word portraits of the community. I was talking before about technology to share the student work, which we feel is very important. Again, when students know there's going to be an audience, they take their work very seriously. They take it to heart. They reflect deeply, and it pleases them greatly to have an audience see their work. For some good examples of this, you can simply Google Doula's neighborhood and see how this works out. Here's a capture from his site. He uses many sorts of tech and social media to get his message out and share the student work. These artworks are shown on YouTube. There's his website. There's his Facebook group. And one of the things he does is he sells these. And I think this models what potentially could be a good fundraising effort for schools. The student work final product is put on a t-shirt and sold online. Kids love these as well. So there you have a few quick examples of using the tech to share the student work. This is from my ex-student Lala, who I introduced you to just a few minutes ago. The project she offered for the book ended up being called Your Brand, Your Future. And this appears in the book under the SEL area of responsible decision making. That's a facsimile of a business card that she created in my classroom 30-odd years ago, which she's kept and valued highly ever since. I'm going to read a passage from the book. I retyped it, and so I'll apologize ahead of time for the typos. This is in the book. In junior high school, I was an insecure yet boisterous young woman with many eclectic interests. Mr. Gura gave us small blank cards in class and asked us to design our future business cards. The future business card activity helped me gain clarity, hope, and confidence that my many related goals were indeed quite attainable. The business card was a sort of passport that I looked at many times during my artistic development. Lala, by the way, became a writer in Hollywood and a popular Los Angeles blogger, amongst many other things. She added, "The activity planted a seed in my brain that I used as a guide. As that seed grew, it helped me stay focused on creative endeavors in high school and at NYU and in my career." So I offer this up as an easy project to do with students, something that has them reflect on who they are, who they want to be, why they want to be that, what are their strengths that they might leverage to get there, and this obviously resonated deeply for this young lady, now grown professional, and it was a real treat to be back in touch with her. The chapter in the book dedicated to this activity, by the way, has more than 6 pages of detailed instructions on how to implement it. There's another project in the book called Our Two Environments. Students reflect on how the built environment and the natural one that they experience makes them feel and influences their behavior. This project is from Miss Acevedo, who teaches in a middle school in West Harlem. She takes her students out into the community and has them take photographs of both nature, whatever nature they encounter there. Sometimes it's potted plants, or it's the garden in front of a housing project, and they take photos of the built environment as well and reflect on how they feel about both. This is all preparation for comparison and reflection to come. Miss Acevedo says, I'm concerned about the lives of my students. I want them to understand how their lives are shaped by their environment. I feel good about putting my students in nature and having them focus on nature, at least the nature that's available to them in inner city Manhattan. And so she likes to take them out of the classroom and they use iPads to grab photos of the environment. And of course, they're exercising their taste and practicing communication skills as they use them. And over time, she's put together a bunch of hacks, art hacks, and these are described in the book. For instance, one of many hacks is they print out the photos and then trace over them and then take those tracings and make full-blown drawings out of those. Also, they print out their photos and collage them or use them in other ways. In short, she's discovered and shares how simple technology can be used easily to support students in investigating, reflecting, expressing, and sharing their works. Here are some links to the handouts, resources mentioned earlier in the presentation. You'll find the first chapter of the book, which has both roughly 20 pages of background theory and discussion on how to approach teaching all of this. And it has the full first project that I showed you, being your own life coach. It also has the table of contents for the book, including the 32 projects and descriptions of what kids will do in each. You can use that for planning purposes. Also, the Castle website with the framework on which everything in the book is grounded. And there's a link to Doula's Neighborhood and more. I see the creation of this book as the beginning of an extended deep dive into project-based fostering of student creativity and social emotional learning. Please look for follow-up.